How's it going, guys? I am clearly not in the building today, so you are getting your lesson via video. Today is day two of our graphing parallel and perpendicular lines. So today we're going to talk about the perpendicular half of it. All right, so let's dive right into it. Today, actually, our goal is to be able to find equations of lines that are perpendicular to others and be able to graph equations that are perpendicular to other lines. All right, those are the two things you should get out of today's lesson. Your homework's going to relate to the same stuff. Here we go. All right, kind of the same types of questions we started out with yesterday. Perpendicular lines. Remember, those are lines that intersect at 90 degrees. That should be an S, 90 degrees. So if I look at this graph, my questions are the same as what they were yesterday for the parallel lines. Remember, parallel lines, we said, had the same slope. So when we looked at this graph, we said, well, how do we know that these two lines are parallel to each other? We said, well, if we look at the slopes, they're the same, right? But now, for you to just tell me, well, they look like they're perpendicular, we have that little symbol there, maybe you'll see that on the graph, is not good enough. We need to know how we know that the lines are perpendicular. And some people might say, well, this slope right here is positive and this one is negative. But then, if I give you a line like this and this, those are positive and negative slopes, and they're clearly not perpendicular. So we need a little bit more information. Sometimes they will have opposite slopes, but there's a little bit more to it than that. Okay. So how do we know that they're perpendicular? Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. Okay, opposite reciprocal. So that means that if I have a slope that is a slope of 2, the opposite reciprocal, remember this is really 2 over 1, opposite reciprocal would be negative 1 over 2. Okay? They have opposite reciprocal slopes. All right? So questions will ask you, determine if the following lines are perpendicular or not. So if we look at this, is this an opposite reciprocal slope for these? Well, it's clearly opposite, but they're not reciprocal. So this one is no. Do these have opposite reciprocal slopes? If I have negative 2, the opposite of that is positive, and the reciprocal of 2 is 1/2. So I have negative 2, the opposite reciprocal is 1/2. So this is, yes, opposite reciprocal. This one is written a little bit differently. It's still in y equals mx plus b form, but it's backwards. Y equals and then mx is over here. So my slopes are 4 and negative 1/4. Okay? If you look at these are opposite reciprocals, so the answer here is yes. Just so we can get a little bit more practice of what this thing opposite reciprocal means. So let's say I have a number of 3. The opposite reciprocal of that would be negative 1/3. If I had a slope of negative 7/8, the opposite reciprocal of that would be 8 over 7. If I had a slope of 3/4, the opposite reciprocal of that would be negative 4/3. Okay? So I think that's good enough to kind of get this idea of opposite reciprocal. And we are looking closely at the slopes in determining if these lines are perpendicular. If you see opposite reciprocal slopes, that means the lines are perpendicular. All right, so questions that are going to involve this type of thing. Questions that you'll see is write an equation of a line that's perpendicular to the line y is equal to negative 1/3 x plus 2 and goes through the point 6, 0. Well, if I give you a graph, that makes this a lot easier, okay? So the first thing that I would do is graph this line. So I go up to 2, and I go down 1, right 3, down 1, right 3 to graph it, right? And there is my line. All right. Now I need a line that is perpendicular to this one and goes to the point 6, 0. Well, 6, 0 is here. Okay. And I need it to go through this point and have a slope that's the opposite reciprocal to negative 1/3. Well, that's going to be a slope of 3. Okay. Now this isn't great because my graph goes up off the line here. That means I'm going to have a slope of positive 3, which is really 3 over 1. So I go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and right 1, or I can go down 1, 2, 3, and left 1. So my line that is perpendicular to it looks like this. And you can kind of see, I know it's not awesome, but that's a perpendicular line. Okay, so on the graph, really it's kind of easy. You graph the line, find your point, find the opposite reciprocal, and then graph the next line. Okay, all right, now what if I just give you, what if it's without the graph? All right, so we're going to have steps that'll ask you to do this and to tell you how to do this without a graph. Okay, so we have the same exact kind of equation here. Y is equal to negative 1/2 x minus 3, and I want that perpendicular line to go through the point 4, negative 1. All right, I'm going to give you some steps here. Write them down. Pause the video if you have to, but here we go. The first thing is to identify the opposite reciprocal slope given. So my original slope is negative 1/2. My new slope is going to be positive 2, which again we can write as 2 over 1. It makes it useful for graphing. Okay, so that's the first step. The next step is to start writing your new equation. Remember, we write this thing of y equals blank x plus blank, and my new equation has a slope of 2. Okay, now what we do is we take that point that we want it to go through, our x, y value here, and we plug in the new point, solve for b. So that's what I'm going to do. My y value is negative 1, so I have negative 1 equals 2 times 4 plus b. Continuing to solve, negative 1 equals 8 plus b. Subtract 8 from both sides. I get negative 9 equals b, and that negative 9 goes right here. This is my new equation. Okay? So pretty much everything here is the same as what we've been doing the past couple days. The only thing that's different is, all right, now I'm changing the slope to make it a perpendicular line. And that new slope has to be an opposite reciprocal. All right, let's do one more example here, and I think that'll be good for the day. All right, writing the equation of a line that is perpendicular to the line y is equal to negative 3x plus 1 and goes to the point 0, 6. Okay, so I'm going to identify my opposite reciprocal slope. My original slope was negative 3. My new slope is going to be positive 1/3. So that's my new slope. That's my first step, right? Identify it. Then I'm going to write the new equation. Start writing it. So I got y is equal to blank x plus blank. And my new slope is 1/3. And again, plug in my point, 0, 6. So I have 6 is equal to 1/3 times 0 plus b. 6 is equal to 1/3 times 0, 0, obviously. And b is equal to 6. Sorry, b is equal to 6. And this value goes right here. So my answer is that. Okay, so very much the same as what we were doing yesterday with our parallel lines, what we were doing Wednesday with writing equations, only now we're adding in that added step of a perpendicular line and finding the opposite reciprocal. All right, so that is your steps and your ways that you're going to find the perpendicular line to a given line. First way that we talked about, remember, talking about how to do it on a graph. First, graph the original line, find the opposite reciprocal slope, and make sure that you start at that original point that you go through and go use your new slope to go to the next point. And then after that, we talked about how to do it without the graph, which is very similar to what we've been doing before. All right. The sub is now going to pass out a worksheet. Make sure you complete that for Monday. Have a great weekend, and I will talk to you then. See you later. Peace.